Hello and welcome everyone to the Boxnaught podcast. My name is Rick, and today we're talking about anything and everything TTRPG and or wargaming or whatever I'm feeling like. Woo! We just got that intro down the first time. I've been working on that, believe it or not. I'll be sitting in my car taking my commute to work, and I'm like, I have messed this up the last 3 times. I think I was opening with the hey guys, it's the Boxnaught podcast, and then not continuing my sentence at all. So hopefully that finally covers it. We talk about everything here, almost everything. I try to keep it related to the tabletop gaming experience and things that influence me artistically. Anyways, we're not talking about the podcast. How have you guys been this week? Things are kind of behind. Usually I post on Wednesdays, and the reason for that is I like the idea of giving, every other week something for you guys to kind of listen to while we wait for the next episode. But this week we didn't release an actual episode. We didn't release any content, any builds. Why is that? I can't really go into it because it would spoil the next video, because we're going to talk about it in the next video. We're going to talk about a lot in the next crafting video. It's going to be quite a video, and that's okay. I'm just gonna have to hold my horses. So much is going on in the background right now, of the channel. I want to tell you guys so much of what's going on, but it's I can't, because that just spoils things for us. That just kind of ruins the vibe. So we're not going to talk about that stuff. We're going to try to talk about things that have been on my mind. Right now, you guys are watching, and I know you're watching because I've set this up. Usually I record and then I paint, and then I put them together, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm painting in the background, but today I do know because I painted it ahead of time, and that is our Chaos Knights. These 2 Chaos Knights you guys are watching me paint, I did in 11 hours. It was quite an ordeal. I took a long time building them. I took my time building them throughout the last 2-3 weeks, and then one morning after doing landscaping with my dad, because I'm helping him with his garden, I sat down, and this was during the last 2-3 weeks that I've been kind of struggling with the next video. That's been kind of what's going on. I'll let you know that it's been a struggle. I feel like I wasn't succeeding at anything. And so I was like, I just need to work on something that makes me feel good. That makes me feel like I can do something. And so I did. I just worked on the 2 nights for 11 hours straight. And it was not straight. I took breaks here and there. I took an hour maybe break, or 30 minutes here and there. I tried to get up and move because it's important. If you stare at something too much, you're just gonna lose track of what you're doing. The flow state's gonna flow away, And also, blood clots are a thing that we need to remember as being hobbyists and people who are on our desks all the time. It's important. It's so important to get up and move. Please get up and move. And if you are doing a desk job, wear some compression socks. I do that for my work, and it helps immensely. The days I don't wear my compression socks, I'm like, oh yeah, I feel it in my legs and in my head. My head just doesn't feel as it feels tight. I don't know. Anyways, we're getting sidetracked. We did 11 hours of painting these nights, and they were really fun. I tried something a little bit new, and I tried using a bit more red in these guys. I wanted red, maroonish shoulder pads and shin plates, and also I think I got a little nervous when painting the flesh. It wasn't coming out pink enough like the other builds, and so I kept putting on more red and more red and more red, and then leaving it thinking it would kind of fade out, but it didn't. And instead it stained it really red. This is what happens when you take breaks from paints and builds for so long. You forget the slight nuances. And I hadn't realized it at first until toward the end. I was like, shoot. They don't look the same. And as I brought these miniatures to my buddies the next day to play Warhammer, one of them said, you don't want them to look all the same, because the cohesiveness, you want them to all be individuals in a sense, because the Knights are such a big in your face faction with so many big hulking mecha things, you kind of want them to all have their own personality. And I kind of, it made me feel better about it, because I was like, oh yeah, he's right. It's each one of these should have their own thing going on. Whereas like a group of troops, little army like Militarum, or a group of Space Marines, them matching, kind of makes sense. And they're troops. They're going to fall off the board pretty quick. So having those guys kind of all match makes sense. It's easier that way. Batch painting is one of those things that you kind of have to do with those bigger infantry factions. And it definitely, that's something that I actually wanted to bring up today that segues into our next thing, is that batch painting kills my vibe. I realized that painting these knights, like the hobby inspiration vibe. Batch painting is so hard for me to do, because it's like, it's true repetition. Like if you want to knock out a whole army pretty quick, batch paint, just same color, same color, same color, same color on each single model. But oh my Lord, does it kill you? I mean, it really takes it out of you. And I think doing these knights and making them such individuals, building little nuances and extra spikes or extra pieces of flesh, or on these on the bigger one in this video, the pauldron, which has like these rivet like bumps on one of the shoulders, that it makes it all so much more stimulating for my brain. It's so good. But yeah, and sometimes you have to batch paint. Technically, these two were kind of a batch paint. I was doing the same steps on them every step of the way, and I was getting tired of it. I was definitely losing my steam here and there. But there was like, I call it the itch, or as one of my favorite artists I used to follow, Peter Draws, calls it the wiggles. I felt the wiggles. I couldn't get rid of them, and eventually, toward the end of the day, my buddies jumped on a Discord call with me during this. And toward the end, my filming just went to crap. I don't know if there will be many video clips of the finishing final piece, finishing final steps, because I was just so tired. And they were really the only thing that was keeping me up. Like, I was in a daze. And I know I could have resumed it on a different day, but one of the biggest rules I have for myself, not rules, but things that I try to do before I play any games with any models, is to have them painted up. Like, I hate personally playing with unpainted plastic on the tabletop. It drives me insane. It pulls out my immersion, and it makes me feel less accomplished as an artist. It's like, I have the time. I know I can set aside the time, and I have the capabilities. So why is this model unpainted and on the tabletop? Like, it's just been the standard I've set for myself ever since I started. Like, I didn't mean it to get this way, but it has. And that's just how I do it. And I think it's been helping me keep things at least somewhat colorful. Most of the time, you won't see a black and white model on the board with my armies. Maybe you might see one, just one, but you won't see like a group, because I try to at least have a little bit of color there. I remember one time I was playing a game with my buddy, and I had one tank that was primed black, and my whole army, the whole army, was my Militarum army, which is like a foresty greenish kind of worn out color. And this tank was going right up the middle while my other troops were flanking left or right, because I had so many troops. I had so much capabilities of like expanding on each of the flanks, on the left to the board and right to the board. And he didn't notice this tank for like the first 2 rounds of the game, because his brain was so concentrated on the colored models. It was camouflaged. Like he was playing Tau in 9th, and he had a hammerhead, and I was so worried about that hammerhead taking out that tank, because it could do it in one shot. You play like 5 rounds, so out of 2 of those rounds, he looked down the lane and didn't register it. He just didn't even think about it. And eventually, by the 3rd round, it was his shooting phase, and he was about to end it. And I go, so you haven't shot my tank at all? He's like, what tank? He's like, oh shit, and it was right there in the middle. And so Yeah, I was being a good sport because I wasn't just gonna be like, haha, you didn't see my tank the whole time. Like, he was obviously having a brain fart, and it was so, it wasn't his fault technically. I just didn't paint my model, which brings me into another thing I've heard is that the more impressive you make certain models, like maybe your HQ or your captain, your sergeant, or your lieutenant, whatever you call them in your armies. I've heard in other tabletop podcasts and or channels that if you make those really really stand out, it can actually be bad in a way because it'll have your enemy eyeballing them first because they know exactly what's the most important model. We almost do it subconsciously, like, okay, I need to obviously take out that thing, or that thing with the big gun, or that thing with this thing. And we don't realize that the smaller stuff within these armies on the tabletop can really do some work. And so, I don't know, it's interesting how our psychology works. I stopped by the local coffee shop for a pumpkin spice latte because we're at the end of August, and I guess that's a thing now. And it felt too soon. And luckily, my local coffee shop did not have it. Only Starbucks is doing it right now. My local coffee shop was like, you should wait. Like, we make an actual, like, homemade pumpkin spice syrup thing of puree and stuff. But no, we're not doing pumpkin spice. Like, we have the flavor, but we're not doing the actual thing yet. And so I was like, okay, I'll go with my usual, which my usual over there is a honey lavender latte with 2 shots of espresso. It is fucking amazing. I used to not be a floral guy when it comes to flavors, but recently it's been hitting the spot. Anyways, yeah, it's been a week. It's been good. Getting these guys painted up was relieving. The game the next day was one of those games where I was playtesting, and my buddy who listens to the podcast, I know you're listening. Thank you so much, dude. He it was pretty close. I'm not gonna lie. The first half I got kind of bummed out because I kind of went as I expected. 2 out of the 4 models like died and just didn't make it, and it was again expected. But it was a playtest, and it was my first time playing that army with anywhere near 1,000 points. And knights are interesting in the sense that they're so elite that if you destroy any single one of those at that low of points, you're going to feel the hurt because your spread isn't going to be as massive. Whereas like Militarum, they are so cheap. You have so many models on the board. It's nice. It's expendable. I remember I actually kind of miss playing Militarum. Not gonna lie, I've been playing demons and knights in 10th, but I haven't played my Militarum for a minute. And I remember just being able to be so flexible with my Militarum. I could just run them wherever I kind of needed them, and just like, oh yeah, you shot down like 2-3 of my infantry units. Who cares? I have like 6 more. Like, it wasn't a worry. But with knights, you have to think in an opposite way. You got to like resource manage and like really learn how to spread the board in a way that works in your favor. Anyways, let's change up the subject just a little bit. Let's pivot just a little bit. I feel like we're talking about the tabletop game way too much. Paints. I've recently learned that one of my local game stores that I like to frequent is getting rid of their Green Stuff World paints, which really bums me out because I was just barely getting into them. I feel like Green Stuff World paints are a paint that people in my local area are sleeping on because holy shit, they are really freaking good. Yes, one of the biggest complaints I've heard is that they're super thin. They are very thinned out, but I think that I'd rather have a thinned out paint than an under thinned paint because I hate sitting there and trying to get the right water ratio. I'd rather add on a couple of layers of paint than trying to figure out the ratio and accidentally gunking up my model. Because the thing with layer upon layer, eventually you're going to hit the layer that covers up the model in a smooth, nice transition. But if you have really thick paints where the pigmentation isn't where the pigmentation is concentrated. It can be a little harder for like a newbie to kind of get that right. I think Green Stuff World is doing it right. And also on top of that, it works amazing for an airbrush. Just pour that thing right out of the bottle, and each one of them come in with a little bead in there so you can shake it up. And then their dropper bottles, oh my god. Forget Citadel paints, guys. Do not do Citadel. I know Citadel is a good paint line for the most part. It's reliable. I used it for the first year and a half for my hobbying, just strictly Citadel like anyone else would. But I did get tired of the paint pots. Oh my good lord, the paint pots were so annoying, and they're still so annoying. I still have a bunch of them. I'm trying to use them and never use them again. Like, I'm literally trying to transition out of Citadel. Only their acrylics, their contrast paint line is actually good, and it really bums me out that it's actually good because it is a very vibrant set of colors to a point where I can't ignore them. It is really good, and it acts different than from some of the other things I use. Like, for example, I use inks, which I feel like can be really, really vibrant, almost on the same level as contrast paints. But there's something about contrast paints that are just a little different. I also need to try out speed paints. I know Army Painter came out with speed paint 2.0s. And a lot of people have, well, not a lot of people. One of the people, I think, what's his name? On a Six Side or something like that. He's a 3D printer, painter, artist. He doesn't make 3D prints. He prints and paints 3D prints. Anyways, he did not like 2.0 at all. And he explained that the streaking was a little bit different, and they were trying to get rid of the reactivation. And he wasn't a big fan. And so I kind of want to try them on my own. I kind of want to buy a whole box of paints and like give you guys a review of them. But I also feel like that's been done before. You know, it's really hard to do things like that because it's like, there's so many other channels that do that. There's so many other channels. Like, we probably have enough people in the community doing that stuff. I probably don't need to add to the pile, but if you guys are curious about it, I'll put myself out there and I will buy a box. I know I'm going to be buying a big box of Green Stuff World paints because, again, that local hobby shop is getting rid of them, and they put them on their clearance aisle for 40% off, which is insane. That's just, the paints were already, I think, $250 or something like that. So that's nutty. That's nutty. And then I think some of their specialty ones was like $4 at most. So yeah, I'm going to be spending like $50 on paints this weekend and have just so much Green Stuff World paints. So yeah, what else have I been doing this week? I've been printing a lot. I've been printing a lot. I printed up 7 more mini tiny little knights, you know, the baby ones, the tiny ones, the armigers, that's what they're called. I printed off 7 more. Actually, the 7th one is currently printing while we're talking, and I think I'm almost out of resin, so I hope it can make it. And then we got to print the weapon options, so I really hope we can get all the weapon options as well, because we'll have to buy some resin this weekend. It's going to be fun. It's going to be kind of some batch work. I'm going to try to force myself to do 3 at a time, because I think 3 is definitely manageable, especially since the armigers are much smaller, and it won't burn me out as fast, and it'll kind of give me an idea of how the army will start to work to the point where I won't be overwhelmed or underwhelmed. So that'll be really nice. A couple months ago, I also printed out some spare parts for my Astra Militarum because I have all these bits. What else am I going to do with them? And I thought, I have all these heavy weapon bits, I have all this stuff, so I went about printing extra bodies and backpacks and things that work for the size of models I have, and dude, genius idea. Like, I have so many more models now, and also so many more models to paint now. I kind of regret it, but it's genius because none of the pieces are going to waste. So I think that's the thing that bums me out the most, is we get these whole boxes worth of bits, which is nice. I like the variety. I shouldn't complain. You know, it's nice to have that. But a lot of these go into my bits bin and are never touched. So with the 3D printer, I'm able to kind of use them, actually put them on the board, it's nice. It's really nice. And it might be my slow project of getting every single bit used, like I think I might permanently switch over to 3D printing. I don't know. I've been having such a good time with it, and I like a lot of the other model options out there and ideas and themes that I don't know if I'll ever go back to Games Workshop boxes. Like, I like Games Workshop models, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of the things they do are like artistically are cool, but with how my budget is and kind of just the variety and the idea of helping local artists online, not local, to my state, but the online freelancing world, it feels a lot better and it feels cool and still genuine. Yeah, I'm painting up our next video right now as we speak. Not right now, but as we record this, they're sitting on my table, and this guy took his time to sculpt and make each one of these models and bits and pieces, and you can see the love and the hard work and the intricacies and the nuances between each one. And it doesn't feel half-assed. It feels really good. There are some models out there where it's like, okay, this dude just slapped some things together. But this actually looks really solid. Like, I'm quite impressed. Speaking of painting 3D printed models, a challenge I want to do, which it will be a video. I just don't know when I will do it. So kind of spoilers, but more like an idea that I'm not sure if or when I'll do it. Painting a face. That's going to be hard. Painting a face. I have not tried that yet. Like a big bust. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little excited. But like, geez. It's going to be a challenge. I actually had one of my cousins reach out to me who found out about my channel at our last family event because I came out with it. And he also had seen a different piece I did for one of my other cousins that was a commission, and it was a Rasmus character from League of Legends. He really liked it, and he was wondering if I would do an Apex character for him at some point when he had the cash, to which I said I would love to, but I forgot a lot of Apex characters show their face, and I think it would be quite a challenge. I'm definitely going to practice on my own time. If I see any faces or busts that I feel like are going to be challenging in a good way, then I'm definitely going to pick them up. But it's going to be interesting. I don't know. It's something I want to work on. I think it would help me hone in my blending. I feel like my blending skills, while good to some degree, really rely on the airbrush. Heavily rely on the airbrush, and I've kind of lost my skill set when it comes to hand blending to some degree. So I definitely want to brush that up. Pun not intended. This weekend we have a Cyborg game scheduled, which I am excited to do, but also nervous. It's that one D&D Cyberpunk game I was talking about last episode. If you didn't check that out, be sure to go click on that video. I talk about Cyborg quite a bit in that one. But it's coming up, and I'm getting the DM frights, the frits. I'm nervous. I got to review a bunch of stuff tonight and tomorrow and make sure it's polished. I always over-review and worry that I'm not going to be able to bring a lot to the table. But oftentimes I forget my players sit around and they talk a lot and they figure things out and they like to strategize and not just fly through it like some of my old players used to. Like, some of my old players would just go, and these guys, they like to chill. They like to mingle, which is good. That's good. They're having a good time, and I'm happy they're having a good time. But I have to do some reviewing of that. I thought for the ending half of this video, we could talk what art books have inspired me in the last couple years / recently. So let me go grab a few of those, and we'll talk about them. I'll be right back. We got a lot of books. We're going long. We're going long. We're going long. So grab your lungs. You guys won't know that reference. Maybe you will. If you know the Glass Cannon reference, I'm so happy you are listening to this podcast. We are avid Glass Cannon listeners over here at the Boxnaught podcast. Anyways, I got a lot of books here. A lot. One of the first ones, do we start with the first big boy? The biggest of boys that, like, I feel like smacked me in the face with how cool sci-fi is? Let's start with, we'll leave the best for last. Let's start with something most recent that I've been reading. A lot of these influences, believe it or not, are manga, because I'm a big anime and manga nerd. Stuff like Japan and Japanese media has always influenced me since I was a little kid, since I was like 13, 14, something like that. Gosh, it's been so long. Anyways, Doho Didoro is one of the mangas I've been reading recently. And I actually watched the anime first on Netflix before picking it up at all. And I like the manga more. Netflix is cool, and I think their 3D adaptation animation style for it wasn't a bad idea, but I definitely like the art book manga more because it feels more raw and visceral. The art and stories by I'm going to say this wrong, Hayashida? And it feels like it's straight out of his sketchbook. Like he didn't go through and erase things and certain details. It's pure, like he just pulled it out and he's like, here you go, here's a story. And it looks cool. It's awesome. Let's flip through it a little bit. I keep like not doing that, but let's indulge. Yeah, it's just different. It's just different. And it's such a weird and wacky world. Like I feel like it's really hard these days to come up with original stories like Doho Didoro. It's a world about sorcerers who go down into this place called the Hole. It's like another dimension, or it might be another place on the world of which they live. They don't really allude to that at all. And what they do is they experiment on these poor people that live in the hole. It's suspected, I think, that the sorcerers live above the hole, like physically, and they just teleport down there to do their experimentations because after the sorcerers use their magic in general in where they live, supposedly the magic flows down and through and down to the hole where it starts messing things up and messing with people. So a lot of people get mutations and a lot of the areas just grimy and gross and destroyed and rotting away. And so it's like this weird dimensional thing that's going on. I don't know. I believe that's how the story goes. I might be wrong. Maybe someone in the comments might correct me, but that's what that story is about. And this dude in this world of the hole, his name's Cayman, and he lost his head, and it is replaced with a lizard head, and he has amnesia as well. So he's looking for the sorcerer who did this to him. He's also one of the few people to have been kind of cursed when he got his head taken away, which is to have anti-magical abilities. So whenever they try to cast a spell on him, it ain't gonna work. He just walks it off. And it's not like his big gimmick. I know the anime Black Clover did something similar, but it's just more of a extra benefit. Like things can still definitely hurt him and kill him in the story, and it's a pretty brutal story. But the artwork is definitely super inspiring in that kind of grim, dark setting that we all enjoy in Warhammer 40k. Like if you like grim, dark, I would suggest checking out Doho Didoro. I remember seeing it at Barnes & Nobles, and at least locally where I'm at, they've been doing these like little staff card reads that like they'll put next to a series that they like. And I felt like someone misrepresented Doho Didoro, and they said cyberpunk, a cyberpunk horror. And I was like, it's nothing near cyberpunk. It's not. Cyberpunk is like technological advancements alongside poverty and struggle and corporatization of a civilization in a sense. Like it's where corporates rule and are the try to enslave almost the general population, whereas Doho Didoro has nothing to do with that. It's its own thing completely. I could see the cyberpunk maybe a little bit in the gear they wear and the way the city looks into some degree, but there's no neon lights. There's no like fantastical machines. It's like if you took our regular everyday world and just made it shitty as hell, like, and added magic. That's all it is. It's almost like a twisted Hayao Miyazaki. Like if you took Hayao Miyazaki and maybe Tim Burton and put them together, maybe Tim Burton. Tim Burton still has his own thing. But yeah, definitely check this series out if you want some artistic inspiration on making individual models or kit bashing or anything grimdark-esque. It's a really good manga, and the show is just as good, if not just a little different in its own fun way. It's very psychedelic-esque, the openings and endings. I love their opening and ending scenes. Let's move on to the next book. I'm just kidding. Hi guys, it's Editing Rick here, and I am interrupting this whole segment. Why? Because I rambled on way too long about I think I have like 8-9 books around me. I went on way too long, and it kind of got off the subject matter of tabletop gaming and how it inspires me, and I realized I just kind of grabbed a handful of books that I like in general, which is cool and not a bad idea for a podcast, but I kind of want to keep it related to what I'm working on today, and so we might leave those books for another episode, maybe just an episode about sci-fi books in general or comic books I like in general, or maybe at the end of each podcast, we'll kind of talk about a book that you guys should check out. Might be fun, but it went on too long, and I just want to condense this down, and especially since this podcast is kind of a solo thing, I want to kind of keep it simple and a little shorter and a little sweeter. So, yes, this is the end of the podcast. I'm sorry. We'll get back to the book stuff at some point, but let's just keep it simple for now. So I want to say thank you so much for listening this far and listening to that segment about Doho Didoro, because it is a really good book and you should check it out. But I gotta run, and it's been fun, and thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for continuing to subscribe and to follow. I promise this is not becoming a podcast channel, but next week should be our actual video crafting week, if not the week after. I might need an extra week out, but yeah, thank you guys. Hit that like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to listen to more, and share with your friends if you think they need a podcast in the background while they do things. And if you have any suggestions for any future podcast subjects, video crafting ideas, and or anything else, please comment down below. As always, thank you for supporting me on Boxnaught, and we will see you in the next video. Okay, bye.